Sagar Bhargav, Project Associate at TERI, and I will be the compere for today's event. I welcome you to the 2021 edition of the Energy and Resources Institute Annual Flagship Event, World Sustainable Development Summit, being held virtually under the broad theme Redefining Our Common Future, Safe and Secure Environment for All. This edition of the WSES marks 20 years of the platform, and it is a matter of great pride for all at TERI that all of you, speakers and delegates, have been able to join us for this important milestone. Your support
How are you, Sid? Good,
is
how are you? Welcome everyone to this
Next, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the thematic track titled Industry Dialogue Towards Sustainable Urban, organized under Project Sheetal, or Alliance for Sustainable Habitat, Energy Efficiency and Rural Development, or with support from Children's Investment Fund Foundation. For the discussion today, we are joined by experts from the government, industry, academia, and philanthropy. The sessions are aimed to discuss the growing need for emphasized by the COVID lockdown in India and sustainability to address the issues while working on social resilience. With this, let's commence with the inaugural session. Please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Mr. R R Rashmi, Distinguished Fellow from TERI. Shri Ranjan Rashmi is a former member of the Indian Administrative Service 1983 batch. He is Special Secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the Government of India. He has been closely associated with the formulation and implementation of policies relating to climate change, pollution, Montreal Protocol on ODS, and environmental clearances, besides being the project director of Clean India Mission. Currently, he is associated with the Center for Global Environmental Research in TERI, where he works on areas relating to climate change, mitigation and adaptation challenges, carbon markets, and related environmental policies and actions. I request Mr. Rashmi to please.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you very much. A very warm welcome and good afternoon to everyone. I welcome all the esteemed speakers and panelists and participants today for this afternoon's session on synergizing actions towards sustainable urban cooling solutions. And we have been fortunate to have the presence of a large number of experts and practitioners from the government, the industry, the civil society organizations, financial institutions for this session. In particular, I would like to welcome Ms. Geeta Menon, the Joint Secretary of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. J. Mauska, former Special Secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. B Thiagarajan, Managing Director of Blue Star Limited, and Dr. Shiris Sinha, Director Climate of the Children's Investment Fund, and other panelists and participants and esteemed colleagues and participants. Let me welcome once again everyone to this session. This webinar focuses on opportunities and in the area of urban cooling, and we will be addressing the questions of how to promote industry collaborations and identify the opportunities for boosting climate-friendly cooling access in urban areas. The objective is to facilitate exchange of knowledge on the best practices in policy, technology, and business model interventions, and with a view to enable everyone, each stakeholder, to prepare a long-term strategy for their own actions, including investments. Now, why are we discussing the issue of urban cooling at all? In the context of global climate change, and also the climate change vulnerabilities which we have in our country, it's one of the key challenges which we have is that of industrial urbanization. And if we are able to modify the kind of pattern of urbanization that we have, and we can make it climate resilient, it's only then that we will be able to reduce vulnerabilities across the communities and urban and rural areas, and also help the global efforts of climate change. TERI has been conducting some studies in this area. A couple of years back, TERI conducted a study in the area of Jharsuguda to understand the impact of industrial activities on its city system and how the impacts could be mitigated. The findings were interesting. We observe that there is a great deal of heat island effect in the town of Jharsuguda because of the kind of activities that are being carried out in that region. And you're all aware that urban heat island essentially is a phenomenon where the temperatures in the urban areas rise in comparison with the non-urban and surrounding rural areas. And this phenomenon is present in all big and small cities today around the world, and more particularly in growing urban cities, urban settlements in our country, with varying intensity, of course. Most of these changes can be attributed to the changes in the land cover, the land use pattern, the industrial activities, and the use of course, the air conditioners in high-rise and multi-story buildings. So naturally, we have to find solutions to these problems, both to reduce the impact of these heat island effects and also to help the communities. The question is, can we convert this challenge into an opportunity for the industry? And this session is aimed at this. The collaboration among industry players is really critical to develop mechanisms to overcome the technical inefficiencies and the economic barriers. We are fortunate that the Government of India has released a national cooling action plan, which looks at the various possible measures and systems, including the use of advanced cooling technologies in space cooling, such as district cooling, low GWP-based refrigerants, advanced materials for thermal comfort in buildings. TERI on its own has also been contributing to these efforts by focusing on urban cooling, the Griha tool, which is developed by TERI, and it has also conducted researches on urban planning and cooling equipment efficiency. In this session today, we are organizing this in collaboration with SIF and the Broad Alliance for Sustainable Habitat, Energy Efficiency and Thermal Comfort for All. Sheetal is the anchor under which we will be organizing this activity. So we are thankful to all the stakeholders, and in particular SIF, for having supported us in this venture. Today we will also be releasing a news track and releasing the e-version of a policy brief on the super efficient AC deployment. So let me, with these thoughts, welcome you once again, and I look forward to a great session of interactive discussion on future industrial collaborations for the purpose of urban cooling, and these efforts, I'm sure, will go a long way in helping us in reducing vulnerabilities, in reducing the thermal discomfort, and also help the global efforts for climate change. Thank you, and once again, and look forward to a great session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rashmi, for the warm welcome address to all, and specifically for mentioning the study that focused on urban heat island effect, which is a major concern and contributor to rising temperatures in cities. So moving on, I now request Associate Fellow Mr. Manjeet Singh to give the theme setting presentation.
Thanks, Madhur. Thank you so much. for this session. Let me just share my screen. Thank you, Madhur. Hope my screen is visible. Can you confirm, please?
Yes, the screen is visible, Manjeet.
Okay, thank you. So, thanks all for joining us today for this important discussion on sustainable urban cooling solutions. Why we are discussing this issue? I think we all are aware about most of the things that urban cooling demand is increasing due to several reasons, and the most prominent reasons are frequent heat waves and heat island effect, which is causing major issue in the urban areas where the cooling demand is increasing over the years. And if we see the major drivers for cooling demand increasing in the urban areas, when we see statistically all the analysis when we do for projecting the cooling demand, we always consider one component, the urbanization component in this, which means there is I think major concern on the cooling demand is due to the urbanization. So it's very important to look in towards sustainable urban planning infrastructure also, so that it could be mitigated. Major impact of due to the cooling demand in urban areas has Delhi's discoms have been regularly reporting that they're in the summer area, summer regions, seasons. 50% of their demand is coming from the space cooling, and it's very important for country like India, where 80%, almost 80% of India's electricity generation is from the coal-based generation. So it's very important from the greenhouse gas emissions perspective. Recently released the economic survey also projected that by 2030, 5.8% of working hours would be lost. India would lose 5.8% of working hours by 2030. And also the Economist Intelligence Unit reports says that India's space cooling demand in total electricity demand would reach by 20% by 2030. Now, there are several instruments which are available through which we can mitigate the drastic consequences of the cooling demand, as well as we can facilitate the access of cooling, where the policy synchronization is very important, given that the integrated policy certainly maximize the impact rather than running it in parallel. Definitely state level and city level capacity building and institutional strengthening. Day before yesterday, Prime Minister has given us two of the important solutions for the climate problem, was togetherness and innovation. And I think sustainable technology solutions and innovative investment models would definitely facilitate the technology transfer and I think India's domestic capacity upgradation through creating millions of green jobs in the cooling segment. There are several opportunities which are being mentioned in the India Cooling Action Plan as well. But if we see the opportunities and if we can tap these low-hanging fruits, the smart cities government has announced for around more than 100 smart cities under their mission. Also affordable housing for all by 2022. We can plan well before to promote sustainable cooling solutions to provide thermal comfort in these built infrastructure. Also, we can synergize the actions around bulk procurement program of EESL with certain mechanisms for public procurement such as GEM and the other big procurement practices to address the affordability concern and to create large number of green jobs with trained, skilled service technicians in this sector. I think clear cut, there are several policy initiatives are available, and we can approach towards that through implementing ECBC, wider adoption of ECBC in the state level actions, also to add in the bylaws. Super efficient technology is one such thing which can be which we would certainly need in future, and as soon as possible, if we can promote these things through star rating system and also awareing people about that. Financial support, attracting investment. Day before yesterday, Prime Minister also emphasized on that India is a huge opportunity for many of the new and next generation technologies to be pilot at the city and state level. And I think one of the important component which we have to address is utility planning and monitoring of cooling demand on day-to-day basis, so that it could be mitigated from the large power cuts, and we can avoid the large power cuts. And TERI, in this area, we have initiated one consortium with the support from Children's Investment Fund Foundation, with our partners, Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, Council on Energy, Environment and Water, which is named as Sheetal. Sheetal is near about name for cooling in Hindi, and it stands for Alliance for Sustainable Habitat, Energy Efficiency and Thermal Comfort for All. Its main objective is to facilitate the and provide the evidence-based research for in facilitating the India Cooling Action Plan implementation. It has several themes which include sectoral actions, space cooling, cold chain, mobile AC, and servicing sector. Enabling actions, where we are focusing mainly on industry collaboration, behavioral change, and outreach campaigns. So for today's discussion, our main focus is we are looking to identify key levers or policy actions or industry ideas which could be implemented at the subnational level, also to facilitate the industry collaboration in terms of technology sufficiency and the affordability, addressing the affordability barriers, and also to how to mobilize the financing from the multilateral organizations at the city level, so that some of these technologies could be implemented or piloted at least. So thank you so much, Madhur, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Manjeet, for setting the theme of the event. I would now like to request everyone to join us for the official launch of NewsTrack, the newsletter for technicians in refrigeration and air conditioning sectors. Next, the team is also proud to launch the policy brief titled Super Efficient AC Deployment, Opportunities Through Business Models in India. Thank you everyone for joining in for the launch. The policy brief and news track will be available on TERI's website for your access. Our next speaker for the session is Mr. B Thiagarajan, Managing Director at Blue Star Limited. Mr. Thiagarajan has handled various projects in the service business, corporate communications and marketing, and corporate affairs and planning before he was promoted as president to ACR&R product groups in 2009. And Blue Star, he currently oversees electromechanical projects and commercial air conditioning systems business, manufacturing and R&D, corporate communications, public relations, as well as corporate marketing services. Mr. Thiagarajan plays an active role in various industry fora and is the past president of Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Association, or RAMA. He is a nominated member of the CII National Council, co-chairperson of the CII National Agriculture Council, and deputy chairman of the CII Western Regional Council. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ms. Geeta Menon, Dr. Shiris Sinha, Mr. Rashmi, Mr. Manjeet Singh, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to talk in this forum. I would like to thank Mr. Rashmi for inviting me to share my thoughts here. I'm not a technocrat or an expert on the subject. I'm going to be talking from the perspective of a business leader. I am going to be candid. You have to bear with me with some of my observations. Before that, I would like to compliment TERI for doing such a remarkable work. I know during the pandemic and after that, what kind of difficulties will be there for running an institution like this. I must confess that one of my gurus is Dr. Ajay Mathur. There were 3-4 influencers in my life as far as this subject is concerned, the subject of sustainability. Dr. Ajay Mathur was the one. I remember early 2000 onwards. It was not about a regulation. He was very clear in demonstrating what we can do. One of the words that he had stated to me was that let us forget about energy conservation law, but as an industry, what we would like to do. Let us set aside the rules and regulations. Same way, Mr. Jamshid Godrej, and as well as Dr. Prem Jain. These are the 3 persons I distinctly remember within India in demonstrating that passion beyond their own businesses or the roles that they were playing in their organization, and demonstrated that India can do it and India should move forward, and how we will carry the stakeholders along with us. This particular summit or this exchange of ideas is in line with their thinking. Now, what has changed for the AC&R industry? Number one is that they're struggling in terms of growth for the past few years. And I can assure you that the next 5 years is going to be a golden period for Indian air conditioning and refrigeration industry, aided by quite a few policy frameworks that are available. Number one is that we believe that we have arrived in the international stage and we can develop and deliver products which are globally competitive. In uncertain terms, I would like to commit this. Number two is there is Atmanirbhar Bharat framework where we are going to be investing in localization. There is a PLI scheme where rupees 5,000 crores is being set aside and close to rupees 10,000 crores of investments are getting committed for the finished goods as well as the components. You can imagine there is going to be a phenomenal amount of demand expansion as well as the capacity expansion. Of course, all of us will look at exporting outside the country, but it is going to be a period where more and more people are going to use air conditioners. On the other hand, I think we have arrived at a point where commercial refrigeration industry also will explode. The cold chain development is going to be aided by the agri infrastructure related investments. pharma and healthcare. You are seeing the budget announcement with regard to the fisheries related infrastructure that is going to be created, and there is a PLI scheme for the processed food industry as well. So we all as industry players have got the responsibility how we are going to be doing our business and at the same time responsibly. And India is a country where you have got the affordability issue. The demand is coming from aspirational middle class, and 80% of the demand is from first-time buyers. And if it is the B2B space, the demand is coming from MSMEs. So what is going to happen? That is, the energy labeling program is in place. It is one of the finest programs executed for over many years, thanks to Ajay Mathur and his successors. I think energy labeling program will be very well executed. I do not have any doubt about that at all. Similarly, whether they connected with the refrigerants, I think we all will be ahead of the curve. There are a few things that we need to do. How we will migrate more and more buyers to the 5-star or the higher affordable categories. And I don't want to use this forum for an advocacy. There are 2-3 ways. The bulk purchase is one of the programs that was initiated. That is one. And indeed, we should look at the Rama is currently working on how it will be, in fact, not only revenue neutral, revenue surplus if we were to make 5-star or 5-star inverter air conditioners at least at an affordable tax rate. Now, as far as the commercial refrigeration is concerned, also the labeling program is commencing, and I think industry will be able to meet those standards. Now, it is not just the equipment, and there are many tech experts who will be speaking to you, and the program itself covers that subject as well. How the air conditioners or air conditioning equipment and systems will be installed and maintained. I think we are lagging behind there. We need to promote and create that capacity for ensuring that the equipment is serviced, because you can manufacture a super efficient equipment, but if it is installed badly or serviced badly, you are not going to reap the benefit of that energy efficiency at all. Now, I am also of the view that you cannot look at the air conditioning alone. You should move towards the green buildings, and that movement should continue at a greater pace, specifically in the next 5 years, as India will be on a fast track. So Greha or other rating systems that are available, including that of IGBC, how we can go ahead and ensure more and more buildings are gold or platinum certified. That should be one of the issues that we should take it up. Now, in terms of quite often I find the dealers or the salesperson in the front line or the service technicians, they are not adequately educated about sustainability. That is why a dealer in a showroom we have to make him push a higher energy efficiency product and explain. That is not enabled. It is purely determined by the customer, and it is going to be driven by the price. The e-commerce platform, again, is not adequately promoting higher energy efficiency products at all. It is more about price and the value that you will get out of it. So this is one of the areas industry as a whole will have to work, how we can educate every stakeholder. Like, for example, a technician visiting an installation, how he will educate the customer or the house owner about energy efficiency. So this capacity building initiative is the responsibility of the industry itself, and we should do more in this context. Often the sustainability as a subject is taken as a highbrow one. It is meant for the elite, and it is not. The people are not able to relate to this. We should also demystify some of the terminologies that we are talking about. To a normal operating manager within my company, I have come to a conclusion that we have to bring in something where he is seeing immediate benefit. I think circular economy framework is the right one that we have to imbibe. Specifically, the AC&R industry, if all companies can embrace circular economy, there is money to be made there. Now, one of the other things that I had stated earlier, I'm using this forum, I'm not using this for any tax concession or something like that, but I am definitely going to leverage this forum to plant the thought that the new generation refrigerants, I believe India has the capability, we have research institutions, that zero GWP refrigerant, we should be inventing and we should be launching it, and it is possible for us to do so. Coming to the food processing as well as the food wastage, we know the footprint, the carbon footprint itself is going to be impacted by the wastage of food. So the cold chain is the solution not only for reducing the wastage of fresh produce and how also we will process more. And therefore, adequate education is needed through advocacy or through CSR to ensure that this country is not going to waste food in large quantities as we do now. Now, I may be jumping the gun to suggest something, but I think we should set a time frame. Like in the recent budget for automobiles, there is a scrapping policy that has been introduced. I think for large air conditioning systems or refrigeration systems, we should set a time frame. That I'm not saying that we may be ready as a poor country to announce that, whether we can come out with a framework. By at least 2025, we will begin implementing some kind of a scrapping policy. It is indeed important. It should not be mistaken that I am trying to promote business for my company or the others in the industry, but I am saying from the sustainability point of view. As I had mentioned, that TERI's work is very well appreciated, and we in the industry would like to work closely with TERI and take this subject forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thiagarajan, for sharing the inspiring and insightful talk and for mentioning many informative points within the cooling sector and the industry. Thank you so much, sir. Next, it is my privilege to introduce the next speaker, Ms. Geeta Menon, Joint Secretary at Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Ms. Geeta Menon belongs to the 1992 batch of the Indian Audit and Accounts Service. She joined MOEFCC in December 2018 as Joint Secretary. Ms. Menon is presently looking after the work of impact assessment, hazardous substances management, Montreal Protocol, Ozone Cell, India Cooling Action Plan, etc. Prior to this, she was working as Principal Director of Audit, Northwestern Railway, Jaipur. Ma'am, I request you to please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Madhur. It is a pleasure to be here today. Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, Manjeet, Mr. Rashmi, Mr. Thiagarajan, and Dr. Shiris Sinha, and all other friends. It's a pleasure to be interacting this way. I noticed that one of the key themes that was mentioned was about synergizing action towards sustainable cooling. And I think synergies is something that I relate to very, very keenly, because synergies is the principle that informs the entire India Cooling Action Plan. So if we were to look at synergies in action as a way to achieve sustainable cooling, what is the kind of synergies that we are looking at? And broadly, I would say it covers a whole gamut of synergies in different areas. It's the synergy between the issues of cooling, energy efficiency, reduced global warming, sustainable development goals, equity, health, and accessibility. So this is a significant range of areas, all of which need to have some synergy between them. Apart from this, I would say there has to be synergy between various sectors: housing, transportation, health sector, the rural sector, and of course the urban sector, which is what we are discussing today. Similarly, there has to be synergy in actions towards sustainable cooling between the government sector, the private sector, the R&D, civil society organizations, and of course the various advocacy groups. So I think it is this synergy again, which is very, very significant if we are looking at sustainable cooling as the larger goal. Of course, there also has to be some synergy between, mandatory kinds of regulation, because while it is not necessarily the best form, it is also not something that we can possibly ignore. So mandatory regulations, incentivizing for adoption of better technologies, access to finance, access to certain kinds of technologies, that again becomes very important. Sharing of information becomes very, very important, as also availability of certain norms or standards, which would help in achieving this kind of sustainability. I think this point has been made already by Mr. Thiagarajan, but just to reiterate, sustainability in cooling would also have to have that synergy between active and passive cooling, and not a necessary dependence always on the latest technology, but very often more passive interventions in the form of good designs, adoption of traditional practices, use of non-conventional materials, all of which can contribute in significant ways. So there has to be a synergy between these various kinds of approaches as well. And lastly, but not least important in any way, it's the emphasis on cooling while also keeping in mind and synergizing it with the need to improve the livelihoods of people, to enhance their skill, and to increase chances of their participation in the economy. So to me, this represents the entire range of synergistic actions that would be required if we really are aiming for something that we could term as sustainable cooling. So the basic appreciation that I think we need to have at this point is that there is no a single solution or one identifiable policy framework that could lead us close to this particular aim. So there has to be an appreciation of the entire range of solutions that would have to be accepted, internalized, and worked with if we are to move towards sustainable cooling. So today we have been speaking a great deal on urban sustainable cooling. And I don't need to re-emphasize why we are laying the stress on urban sustainability in cooling. Not only because urban areas are the ones where there are the largest concentration of human beings today, but also because the improvement in sustainable cooling in urban areas would be key to ensuring that there is resilience of urban areas. They are less prone to disasters, natural disasters, and also less contributors in many ways to such climate change and other issues, which can exacerbate the overall problems of heating and the lack of comfortable cooling that is available to a vast majority of people. So sustainable cooling is therefore key undoubtedly to sustainable urbanization and cities that are climate resilient. Another very important point as far as sustainable cooling goes, and it has been reiterated by speakers before me, is the entire issue of energy use and therefore of energy efficiency itself. The India Cooling Action Plan itself had projected how the overall demand is projected to grow by about 8 times between 2017-18 to 2037-38. And the range varies, with the building being the major contributor. Also, the other significant areas being transportation at about 5 times the 17-18 base levels, and the other important sector being, of course, the cold chain and refrigerator. So these are the major sectors. So the India Cooling Action Plan and the ministry both recognize this, that in the aim to harmonize energy efficiency while implementing the ongoing HCFC phase out and the adherence to the Kigali Amendment commitments. These, I think, need to come together, and we have to be able to ensure that we are able to fulfill and keep an eye on all these objectives at the same time. And that is where the key to planning and the key to taking the right kind of policy initiatives becomes very, very important. And we need to be able to do that in the next few years, because these, like Mr. Thiagarajan said, are the very, very crucial years where we are going to witness a significant spike in the use of air conditioning, for one, in the domestic sectors, and also the widened use of, say, cold chains as the economy grows, lifestyles change, and there is a need to bring accessibility to greater pharmaceutical facilities, agricultural cold chains to larger populations in the country. So this is an unavoidable path that we are now on, and it is our responsibility to ensure that that is handled with, and we meet it with responsibility, acutely aware of the need for efficiency. So now certain ideas are very, very crucial for sustainable cooling. I'd like to share some with them, some of those with you. One is, of course, a balanced approach between passive cooling and active cooling strategies. This has been already mentioned, where we use natural and mechanical ventilation in building designs. And we also actively consider, which is, of course, one of the successes we've had about mandating, presetting of temperatures for air conditioning equipment in commercial use, making it probably behavioral changes when it comes to residential use, so that people are also encouraged. So I think behavioral changes and the acknowledgement for that, given the experience that the government has now had with the Swachhta campaign, I think there is sufficient evidence to prove that these kind of behavioral changes can and must be taken up on a mission mode if we are to reap the larger benefits that we are looking for. Similarly, for the cold chain network also, is there the possibility of using renewable energy-based solutions that can be considered? So these issues, to a large extent, have been met or at least addressed in the India Cooling Action Plan. Now, I would like to take off from what Mr. Thiagarajan mentioned about the cooling chain, and I think with the government's priority about doubling farmers' income, we could not probably overestimate the importance that a sustainable cold chain would meet or would contribute to that entire doubling and prosperity of the farming community at large. Similarly, I think in the context of the pandemic and our experience thereafter and the need for a robust public health mechanism, a very valuable cold chain network for medicines, for other health facilities, which would have the widest possible reach, is again an important need of the hour. So while these are commitments that we are now making, it is for us to decide what is the kind of technology initiatives that we could take in terms of choice of refrigerants, structure of the system itself, and more importantly, how to make it reach the remotest corners. So while the focus on urban cooling solutions is indeed very welcome, I think the time has come where we could not possibly see these things in isolation. The urban versus the rural is very much a continuum, because if were you to talk of the cold chain facilities for food, for fresh vegetables, for agricultural produce, or for medicines, I think there is a very, very close linkage between the rural and the urban. So while we do focus on the urban or we do focus on the rural, I think it would be very, very difficult to sort of see the two as distinct silos. So that is another learning, I think, for all of us in this entire process. Similarly, servicing, and I'm glad again Mr. Thiagarajan mentioned about this, and while he did say that it is something that the industry needs to really focus on and improve the standards, and it is heartening to see that kind of initiative coming from the industry. I would just like to say that in the ICAP document, we are acutely aware of the need to improve servicing practices and how this as a single source can contribute significantly to sustainable cooling. And we also saw in it a very important opportunity to improve livelihoods, to build skills, to build upon available skills, and which is why we have extensive programs in collaboration with the industry associations for actually upgrading the skills, for providing some kind of certification. And I think, of course, the News Track initiative by TERI is, in that direction. So I think this is an area that must happen concurrently and continuously without a break, because as the AC usage increases, as the economy grows, this would be probably the single important, factor that we have to keep in mind. And also, in case we are to even look at, scrapping old ACs, an idea that was mooted earlier, I think important servicing skills for that too, again, is a very important point from the point of view of the climate, perspective, the perspective of the Montreal Protocol. So I think these are important areas that we need to, again, keep in mind. So at present, we are focused on some broad strategies. One is the integration of heat mitigation measures into documents and policies that are already in place. I mean, like it would not be essential all the time to come up with a new document or a new policy initiative. There is enough space available for us to incorporate these creatively into existing policies. And we feel that that would give it a greater chance of success and help us achieve the objectives far more than simply coming out with policies afresh. So I would like to flag a few, for instance, the National Building Code, the Energy Conservation Building Code, the Eco Niwas Samhita, the Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment, the GRIHA, and Leadership in Energy and Environment Design rating systems. All these, I think, are available, for us to operate through. And I'm happy to share that the Ministry of Environment's, standard conditions that it recommends for all infrastructure projects and buildings in particular, which come to us for environmental clearance, have already taken on board these considerations. It is a small tool, but something which we felt was easily doable, and it has already happened. And I think this would be a small baby step in that direction. Similarly, we feel there is a need to partner extensively with municipal governments, because really this is the one point where there is a lot that can be done in terms of be changing behavioral norms, incentivizing adoption of certain technologies, or even, the point from where you are able to bring together resources for, maybe improving skills. So I think the involvement of municipal bodies becomes very, very crucial, and that is going to be a focus area for us in the years to come. I would also like to briefly mention about the transportation sector. Again, with urbanization, I think it is just the other side of the same coin, because urbanization and increased transportation needs, passenger vehicles, these are bound to grow in the same direction. Now, again, here we do not really see the need for a new policy initiative, but instead we feel that, there could be a greater collaboration with the existing schemes of the government India. For instance, the AMRIT, which is the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation Program of Government of India, the e-mobility program. Now, these are policy tools already available for us, and I think we are looking to actively engage with these initiatives so that this agenda of sustainable cooling in the transportation sector gets met through the levers available as far as the transportation sector is concerned. There is, of course, also a need for us now to support the decision making in this area by integrating scientific evidence. And I think that is where we need to now actively collaborate in the coming years, where we have the necessary support of new research in terms of both encouraging such research, to be able to access the outcome of such research, and then building it into our policies and programs, and also have a collaboration and engage, facilitate an engagement between the scientific developments on the one hand and the industry on the other. I think this conversation is very, very crucial for any kind of sustainable cooling. So some of the other activities and tasks that we feel that could be taken up by all the elements that are involved in this ecosystem could be: one is development of some national benchmarks and standards on heat mitigation measures. In fact, we have suggested that we could have some prototypes of building designs with the necessary cost estimation, both for urban and rural low-cost housing. I think this becomes very, very important, given that the government of India is focusing at this stage on, housing, affordable housing for the weaker sections. So if we could integrate these principles into that, that again becomes very, very effective. Similarly, we feel that there can be a greater public communication of heat mitigation, measures that can be taken. And I think it is here that we have to actively engage with elements, such as advocacy groups, maybe media agencies, private advertising agencies, corporate social responsibility. All of these could come to create a kind of mass awareness on the issue of measures for heat mitigation. And I think it can very well be done on the line of past experiences. We have the BEE's successful examples. So I think we need to do some brainstorming to come up with this as an effective method. And heat mitigation strategies, of course, I am aware, are already very much part of the green building rating system. But I think we could relook at whether there can be an increased weightage for such things, whether there can be some kind of incentives, some faster approvals. This is something that is still under examination, but I think it can most certainly be done. So with this, I would like to end my session at this point and just go back to the starting comment that essentially sustainable cooling is all about partnerships. And I hope that this particular initiative by TERI would help us move forward in that direction. And the ministry would be actively looking forward to engage with and establish synergies, as it were, with all the agencies that would likely be likely contributors to this larger goal. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity. Namaste.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It is always a challenge to take just one quote from your talk and mention it as a highlight, because like always you have mentioned various points and put them in a very articulate manner. I believe every stakeholder was able to take something crucial from that talk. And you have very rightly mentioned that there is no one solution, and we need to have a holistic view and synergies within all areas of cooling to achieve sustainable cooling, while being very active in our actions in the few coming years. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your talk. Now it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, Dr. Shiris Sinha, Director of Climate at Children's Investment Fund Foundation. Dr. Sinha oversees CIF's climate change portfolio in India, which includes our work on energy decarbonization, air quality, electric mobility, regenerative agriculture and ecosystem restoration, and climate policy. He also manages CIF's clean energy transition portfolio in South, Southeast, and East Asia, and global program on climate ambition and transparency. Prior to joining CIF, Dr. Sinha was the deputy head with the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation, or SDC, in India, where he led and managed delivery of bilateral cooperation programs on climate science, resilience and adaptation, energy access, and climate smart cities. He was also the head of climate and energy program at WWF India. Dr. Sinha, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Madhur. Thank you so much. Ms. Geeta Menon, the Joint Secretary, fellow panelists, Mr. Rashmi, Mr. Thiagarajan, Manjeet, and other panelists who will be speaking after the session and speakers. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me and giving this opportunity to speak on this thematic track on sustainable urban cooling solutions. The fact that there is a recognition of sustainable cooling and the impact it will have on economy and people by Government of India when it came out with a very ambitious and with strong political will with the India Cooling Action Plan, which, as Ms. Menon mentioned, is a comprehensive and a cross-cutting action plan. It was very encouraging for philanthropies like us to see how we can essentially engage and support in this particular area. And I think as one of the largest global philanthropy working on children, we are seeing that children are fast becoming collateral damage of multiple global crises, one of them being the intergenerational burden of climate and environmental disruption. So for us at SIF, investing in promoting cooling efficiency and solutions has been a key focus area for last several years at the global scale. And we therefore have been part of setting up a Kigali Cooling Efficiency Partnership Program along with 16 other foundations, which aim was to promote energy efficiency of cooling in developing countries to support the Kigali Amendment of the Montreal Protocol. Building on our global experience and taking advantage of ICAP and the comprehensiveness of ICAP, about last year we initiated a new grant which Manjeet had introduced, which is the Alliance for Sustainable Habitat, Energy Efficiency and Thermal Comfort for All, or SHEETAL in short form, which has three partners, which is TERI, Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, and Satish will be speaking later, and CW. And the objective of the way when we designed SHEETAL was that it should be fully aligned and to provide how the think tank and the civil society can play a role to facilitate in the implementation of ICAP. So we believe that cooling offers one of the largest CO2 reduction and the near-term abatement potential, as well as tremendous opportunity to improve the livelihood of millions, having application ranging from work productivity, food security, and generating jobs. So through our investment in India through SHEETAL, we are aiming to support the implementation and acceleration of ICAP. We are also happy to support the integrated vision that ICAP brings by looking at cross sectors encompassing the areas of reducing cooling demand through a work that we will do in the buildings and energy efficiency in buildings, refrigerant transition, enhancing energy efficiency, as well looking at access to cooling and better technology options. At a strategic level, what the consortium is trying to do is to facilitate with the help of policymakers, industries, and civil society, both nationally and globally, to analyze and inform the different aspects of social resilient cooling, both in urban building infrastructure, also looking at the vaccine immunization supply chain, food security to cold chain, and focusing on thermal comfort for better health for vulnerable communities. To enable our youth and take a leadership and role in combating and addressing the issue of energy efficiency, one of the work that the AEEE is doing is to conduct a series of educational webinars as part of the Solar Decathlon, and which has essentially covered over 900 engineering and architecture students representing 103 institutions on topics of building science and how you basically integrate energy efficiency as part of the building design. And the idea is that the sensitization should help in the pushing forward the national agenda of net zero energy, water, and waste in the building sector. AEEE is also going to focus very strongly on looking at solutions which are needed in terms of the cold chain network. To take the work further, SHEETAL Consortium has also started to engage on the sustainable habitat by catalyzing the implementation of ECBC in Karnataka. So TERI has been a knowledge partner for the state government, and it has now been playing a role to facilitate the notification of the building code last year, which is fully aligned with the Energy Conservation Act. CW, on the other hand, is working on the strengthening the mechanisms and initiatives that will be required to publish more on the public and private R&D platforms. So that is one of the critical areas that we are basically looking to work. And the other aspect which Mr. Thiagarajan very rightly said, and Ms. Menon also mentioned, that the focus area of Sheetal is also to engage with the servicing sector, to train them, to build certification, which can basically help in a robust servicing technician network to be available. So that's one of the work that CW is going to work. The other aspect of this investment and the grant is that engaging with consumers as well as to bring about a behavioral change. And this is what the previous speakers have really very well articulated and said, that this is the most important aspect of the transition that we want to see as far as sustainable cooling solution is concerned. So our partners have basically carried out a behavioral study, which is now in the process of finalization, which is a national level perception to engage with the wider stakeholders, right from the policymakers at the center and state, with industry, with consumers, and the servicing technicians, to understand what the perceptions on cooling sector issues are, and then what the challenges are, and therefore then identify different levers for what a public awareness or a campaign on sustainable cooling solution should look like. So as the Joint Secretary mentioned, will like to take your guidance, ma'am, in terms of shaping a wider awareness campaign. This is what the Sheetal is able to provide and deliver, to work with the right range of stakeholders through media, advocacy groups, and others to bring a behavioral change in terms of sustainable solutions. The other aspect of this investment is also looking at the role of sharing of practices and learnings of lessons between the industry and other platforms. So one of the things that TERI is going to work and spend time and resources on is to look at an industry platform, both at the domestic level, but also learn from global experiences. So it is currently engaging with industry groups and for a knowledge exchange with, for example, with France. And also it wants to foster innovation and technology development through this industry collaboration. So as Mr. Thiagarajan said in the beginning, and I would really request if you could play a role in guiding TERI and this industrial platform that TERI is going to set up, and we through the Sheetal program would be happy to collaborate with different industry groups to create that momentum that is really needed to bring the change that is required. Let me just conclude by saying that our objective is that this is a consortium which brings together the think tank groups and the civil society, and has the ability to kind of bring together the entire collaboration to work in a very synergistic manner. And as Ms. Menon said, synergy is the core at the ICAP, and that's what we are trying to do through Sheetal. And our hope is that over the period of next 3 years, we should be in a position to create a platform with the help of Sheetal that will help in facilitating the climate-friendly cooling solutions in India, and advance these different actions and engagement sectors that ICAP essentially focus on. And so let me once again take this opportunity to thank the guidance that MOFCC and then Ozone Cell has been providing to the Sheetal team. Also, the industry leaders have been giving them inputs and suggestions on what needs to be done. And I think your continuous support and encouragement will help us achieve what the consortium that we have created should be achieved. So thank you so much. And thank you, Madhur, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha, for sharing the stellar work being done under Project Sheetal in support from CIF. And with this, we conclude the first session for the event. I would like to thank and express my wholehearted gratitude to the speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules and joining us to share their expertise and invaluable thoughts. Thank you, Ms. Geeta Menon, Mr. Thiagarajan, Dr. Sinha, and Mr. Rashmi once again. We will now move on to the technical session for the event. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome anyone who has just joined in for the discussion. I would also like to mention that if you have any questions for the speakers, please go ahead and drop them in the chat box, and those will be taken up during the Q&A session. I would request all the speakers for the technical session that to kindly keep their talk a little brief, as we are running short on time. So without any further ado, let's move on. It is my honor to welcome and introduce the moderator for the technical session, Mr. J.M. Moshkar, former Special Secretary at Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Mr. J.M. Moshkar is a former Indian civil servant who worked in key ministries during economic liberalization beginning 1991. His last stint was in MOFCC from 2006 to 2012, where his work was related to climate change, impact assessment, and pollution control, and the related treaties like UNFCCC and Montreal Protocol. At present, He is advisor in Observer Research Foundation, an eminent Indian think tank. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. Well, this is post-lunch sessions always have a problem of overrunning. Now, this session was supposed to start 35 minutes ago, and it is now to end 25 minutes from now. So it is a challenge. I thought I was chairing this session, but whatever, as moderator or as chairman, it's a challenge. But let me still make one or two remarks as I'm supposed to. So, you see, as you must have noticed from the inaugural session, that we are at a beginning stage of tackling a multifarious, multidisciplinary, complicated issue. Now, the way to go about solving these kind of problems is maybe divide them in components and look at each component individually and then try to unite and hope for some kind of a solution to emerge in due course. So we have 5 eminent panelists who will speak on different aspects of the issue. But I must add 2 things. One is the impact of COVID is not only on the health sector and the cold chains for vaccines and so forth. There has been a major shift in how we conduct business. The way we are holding this webinar itself is an example. Rather than meeting in a big hall and speaking and all, we are meeting by web. But the change I was having in mind is working from home. The big business has realized that instead of making people sit from 9 to 5 in a big hall and extract work, it is cheaper for them and more strenuous for the worker to make the worker work from home. Now, what implication it would have on the sustainable cooling is something which is still to be rolled out, but my guess is there will be a significant implication. Now, my second observation, I will leave it for my closing remarks because time is short. Now, let me start from the first panelist. We have Mr. Dinesh Kumar with us, who represents Government of Kerala. He is head of the Energy Efficiency and Management Center there. And I hope in his remarks he will focus on what is the role of states like Kerala in implementation of the Indian Cooling Action Plan. Mr. Dinesh Kumar.
Sir, I think
you are on mute, sir. Mr. Dinesh.
Yeah. Very good morning. Good afternoon. Can you hear all?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Because the time is running short, I'll just skip through whatever I have to say. The thing is, Kerala by default, people think that because we are a much more socio-economically uplifted sort of a state. The number of buildings that are coming up in Kerala had been in the uprising trend right from 1990s onwards. Now, till about 2010 or so, no studies were being conducted as far as the urban heat island effect or what is happening from regarding the heat that may be generated out of the buildings or the energy that is being guzzled into the buildings to cool the building. Now, right, just because it was not found very necessary at those times when Kerala's climate used to be much pleasanter. But with the time going on, like a frog which has fallen in hot water, slowly, we never knew that the heat is building upon us, and suddenly we found that during the floods and cyclones are coming up in regular intervals unexpectedly. We find that the climate change effect has crept in. It is in this context that the things need to be studied. It was regarding Kerala. It was in 2013-14 when first study on the urban heat island effects on a city level has happened. The study was a very small one without going into much of a detail. But still, as per the studies, we have found out that there is a marked change in temperature as far as the cities are concerned. In the city as compared to other relatively less developed areas. We cannot in Kerala we cannot say differentiate much about cities as well as the small towns and all. But still there was as per the studies it has found that there is an increase of approximately 4.7 degrees Celsius of urban heat as far as the Cochin city is concerned. Cochin city is the most biggest city as far as Kerala state is concerned, and it is also seen that the nighttime temperatures are also not falling as high as it is expected, and during winter mornings and all, the urban heat island effect was more prominent in because Kochi is having a lot of water bodies, lakes and water bodies nearby. The region near the water bodies were finding it much more difficult than other city areas, wherein the temperature difference was more as compared to the cities near the water body, it was much more higher. These were the initial studies which were happening in Kerala. Thereafter, in 2017, we have brought in this ECBC into our mainstream, and 2019, it was brought into the building regulations and all. But still, takers are still minimal, and the local self-governments who give the permits, they still find it difficult whether the particular buildings need to be brought into these ECVC brackets or no. And in these circumstances, we started giving trainings for specific a group of engineers who are trained to be cadre to design, if at all new buildings are all coming up, design buildings according to the energy conservation building code norms. That is one side of it. With all these things, Kerala, in a Kerala perspective, we still feel that the data on the micro scale heat island intensity or the measured urban canopy layer heat density is minimal, and we need to have more data so that we can have a concrete decisions or concrete plans to move ahead. We need also Kerala, which used to be having very good traditional building techniques, which of course we cannot follow in a new scenario, modern scenario, but still the concepts, if at all, which are suitable, can be brought in so that the localized effect, the global warming potential constants can be considered, and local climatic zone classifications can be brought into any designs which may be suitable, because Kerala has a unique climate with very warm, humid, and simultaneously having dry or even cold regions as well. Therefore, we need to have specific zones to be brought into in Kerala. That's the general effect thing which I have to say about Kerala. Then we also need to, we are in such a stage that local self-government and town planning department need to be brought into close coordination with the power or the forest and environment department to bring on the but specific policies and all. That's all I have to talk on this session. If anything else, we can discuss at a later time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dinesh Kumar. Short and succinct. Now, next speaker is Dr. Satish Kumar, who is president and ED of AEEE, the organization which is behind, one of the organizations which is behind Sheetal. He was responsible also for ICAP formulation and has been advisor to a number of ministries in Government of India. In your brief remarks, Dr. Kumar, may I suggest that you speak on the role of civil society and innovation in implementation of ICAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. Of course, a lot of ground has been covered by earlier speakers from Madam Geeta Menon, Rashmi sir, Dr. Shiris Sinha, Mr. Thiagarajan, and the presentation that Manjeet has made. So as I start, first of all, I would like to thank TERI for extending an invitation to me to speak at this forum. And just to set the context, I would just reiterate a couple of points from what the earlier speakers have mentioned, and then I'll come to the point. So what we feel that India is really facing a perfect cooling storm. And the reason we say that is that we have 1.3 billion people with very extremely, I think, with high rising aspirations, with a growing middle class. Also, we have a largely tropical climate. And all this also cannot take us away. This is from thermal comfort perspective, but India is also pivoting from a grain-based to a more fruits, veggie, and meat-based diet, which will require, I think, more refrigeration, commercial refrigeration, as has been pointed out. So I think it's very evident that the need for cooling and refrigeration, I think, is probably one of the largest anywhere in the world. And India, I think, for that particular reason, needs to be paying very, very close attention. The other thing that I would like to highlight is that India is already displaying its leadership in the cooling and refrigeration sector. And one of the things that Madam Geeta Menon mentioned, and through the development of India Cooling Action Plan, where AEEE, along with many other civil society organizations, I think we were involved very closely in partnership with the government and in partnership with the private sector. It stood out for the cooperation between the three sectors, so government, public sector, as well as the civil society organization. And I think that's the model which is really needed to address, I think, the challenges that a multidimensional problem like cooling and refrigeration is posing, because it cuts across everything. It is not that it is a built environment problem, or it is an agricultural problem, or it is a manufacturing problem. I mean, you name anything, and you will find that cooling and refrigeration kind of like runs its thread across that. The three things that I do want to emphasize, which is something that I think India is making a name for itself through its leadership that it has shown. So first of all is the thermal comfort for all. And I think this is something that there was a publication I'm going to talk about this platform, which is India Cooling Coalition. So it came out with a document which was Thermal Comfort for All. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change wrote a forward saying that I think rather than talking about cooling for all, I think India should adopt this principle of thermal comfort which will allow much larger segment of the population to achieve thermal comfort. It will allow architects and engineering community to design buildings with passive cooling techniques first before we deploy active cooling. And then a very closely aligned thing related to this is the adaptive thermal comfort standard, which is also part of National Building Code. CEPT University played a leading role in that. CEPT is also part of India Cooling Coalition. And this is also implicitly embedded in the Ministry of Power directive that 24 degrees Celsius needs to be maintained in all the government all the government office buildings. And considering that there could be anywhere between 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, 3 to 5 degree percent energy savings for each degree Celsius rise in the set point temperature, I think just adopting this adaptive thermal comfort model can actually go a lot, go a fair distance in terms of providing sustainable cooling. And the third, of course, is the India Cooling Action Plan, which is now being used by UNEP, by Kigali Cooling Efficiency Plan, to use it as a model for developing National Cooling Action Plan methodology, where Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy is involved. And but it's not just AEEE, it's I think all the work that has gone into the ICAP, which is allowing us to share, I think, India's leadership in a multilateral forum. And most of the National Cooling Action Plan that are going to get developed around the world, they will benefit from the work that India Cooling Action Plan, the civil society organizations that have done, is going to contribute. And it is also pretty important in the spirit of South-South collaboration, or I think when India goes to COP26, I think it can show its leadership in some of these areas. So one of the things that I just like to spend maybe a couple of more minutes is talking about India Cooling, which is sort of a civil society organization platform. And if you look at the latest cooling emissions and policy synthesis report that has been launched by UNEP and IEA, they are forecasting that reductions of between 210 to 460 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions can be delivered over the next 4 decades. And they are also quantifying that the number of cooling appliances is 3.6 billion. And this can rise to about 14 billion cooling appliances if everybody who needs a cooling appliances get it, and not just who can afford it. And I can bet that a fairly significant number of these cooling appliances in this analysis is forecast to come from India. So what can civil society do, knowing that I think we have heard from Mr. Thiagarajan, he talked about I think the leadership that private sector can do. We have also seen the leadership of the government of India, not just, I think, India Cooling Action Plan, but also through building energy codes and standards and labeling program. So I think this was the thinking in establishment of India Cooling Coalition. So if you go to indiacoolingcoalition.org, I think the website is there. And it's a multi-stakeholder group, and it is led and represented by 20 non-profit organizations. And these are all pretty much all the leading organizations working. Just give me 30 seconds. And it also provides a national non-governmental platform for dialogue with various national and international stakeholders, and jointly recommends policy initiatives to ensure the success of government programs on smart cities, housing, buildings, universal access to cooling, cold chain transport sector, refrigerant servicing sector. And lastly, I think the coalition works with a wide range of key actors from government, international organizations, academia, research organizations, and civil society groups to facilitate knowledge exchange, dissemination, and joint action towards sustainable cooling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Friends, we have got three more panelists who have their own valuable views. But on the other hand, we have about 20-25 minutes, after which we'll be off the net. So I suggest let's make our vital points and then take some question answers, because the audience. Hello. So let me come now to Dr. Jitendra Bhambure, who represents Refrigeration and AC Manufacturers Association, and he is a member of number of committees of Montreal Protocol. So, Dr. Bhambure, my request to you would be, please make essential comments so that we can finish the remaining three panelists in next 15 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you, TERI, for calling, and definitely I'll make an attempt to complete within the allotted time. But also, we prepare and come for these sessions, and then we should get an adequate time that is given to us. Anyway, so I would put it this way, that comfort for all today is able to hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are
Hello.
audible.
Okay. So the comfort for all is primarily given through air conditioners, air coolers, and fans. And we should look at the synergy of all the three, at times with overlapping, because each one has got its own footprint in terms of refrigerants, in terms of its energy consumption that is there while providing comfort. So that is the point number one I would like to make. Now, the point number two is India is already ahead of the adopting low GWP refrigerants, and a few of the manufacturers have adopted R32, few have adopted R290, and and it is more likely that we will be ahead of the curve. Now, the next point I want to make is most important point. Efficiency of the equipment and that of air conditioners will reach a plateau when affordability factor is brought into consideration. If we say just go on increasing the efficiency who will buy that, because affordability will become an issue. So this is the third point I would like to make. The next point is the servicing. Servicing, we have no idea of what happens in a poorly serviced unit in terms of its dirty coils, in terms of leakage in refrigerant, and how much it is impacting the cooling and how much it is impacting possibly the energy consumption. And we will have to look into it in detail. Servicing techniques and servicing methodologies, it is sorry to say that have not changed for a very, very long time. Now, what is solution to this is that we have to bring in innovation in servicing and automation in servicing. AI or artificial intelligence and remote monitoring will play a big role. It will give a comfort to the customer that servicing has happened properly. It will also be a measurable parameter that can be brought in for this before and after servicing. The next point I want to bring in is we have been talking of innovation and technology. I would like to put a point here that most of the research which has to be done done by the academia is in place. What is really required is transforming that innovation and those techniques into a product, or get adopted into product, which is for which what is required really is the management of technology, and this field has to be really looked into in detail. Otherwise, the innovation will remain only in the research papers. Other important aspect of today's program is related to heat island effects. And unless we rope in architects and reduce the impact of buildings getting heated and bring in new techniques, bring in new methodologies, as I said, evaporative cooling can be a very effective use to reduce the heat load of the buildings. I mean, it is not directly for the comfort of the humans. At times, yes, it can be used for directly in a dry climate, but it can reduce the heat island effect of the units. Now, the other point which I would like to make is the replacement policy of buy higher efficiency product. There has to be some policy in place of replacement of the units. There should be some incentives to be given. Just to cover, recap all the things, the most important is a study, a research should be initiated in terms of looking at what happens, what is the deterioration in the units when they are poorly serviced. There should be some measurable parameters that should be developed, and AI should be effectively used. And all the aspects of AI are not known. Our previous speakers also spoke about the adaptive cooling, which is in terms of the behavior change, and AI can also make a big change here. With this and with the limited time what I have got, I will finish my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bhambure, for being short. These restrictions come on all the organizers. Please bear with them. Now I have Mr. Benjamin Hickman, who is an advisor to United Nations Environment Program, UNEP. Mr. Hickman is an energy expert and is associated as an advisor with the Cool Coalition. I hope that besides the questions, he will also address the global perspective because he represents a global organization. And again, please, 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank TERI for the invitation today. I hope I'm audible. So, yes, I was asked to speak about UNEP's work on district cooling, but actually I think the global perspective that I really want to put across is 2 points, main points. One is we've seen globally that the role of municipal governments, as Madam Geeta Menon mentioned, will be crucial in addressing sustainable urban cooling. This has been seen both for heating in the northern countries, and now it's going to be true for cooling as well. You're not going to be able to meet cooling demand sustainably without building the capacity of cities. So a lot of UNEP's focus is around building that role of cities, which I'll come to. The second point is around servitization of cooling. Many speakers have talked about, the upfront costs of equipment, the role of servicing equipment, and we see a much bigger role for cooling as a service models, both for space cooling, but also for cold chain, as a way of shifting investment to people that can manage the cooling equipment appropriately. So on the role of municipal governments, we've seen several speakers mention different areas where city governments need to look at cooling. As the active approaches, so one which I'm particularly working on under UNEP is on district cooling, but there's also the city's role in public procurement, and also even what kind of equipment are being used in social housing, for example. And then there's the passive cooling side, and it was mentioned a lot around the role of building design, and we cool roofs, elements like this, but we also have to look at urban form generally. And I was interested to hear what the speaker from Kerala mentioned around the urban heat island effect, especially at night, and the role of urban design in terms of how you're setting out your city. I mean, you can see it when I was living in Delhi, just the difference between certain areas. You can just feel the difference in temperature. And a big part of that as well is the role of nature. So the role of trees, the role of lakes, etc., in delivering a sort of passive cooling for the city. So UNEP is very focused on building capacity for cities on cooling. So under district cooling for the last 5 years, we've been working in India and in 14 other countries globally on building up the first projects of district cooling led by cities. So we've had 2 cities in India, so Rajkot and Amravati, that have already tendered district coolings that we've supported. And also we have an industrial park, Hyderabad pharmaceutical city, which will soon tender India's biggest district cooling network. So building up that role of cities in addressing, in delivering that kind of technology is crucial, because the benefits of it, so the studies we've done, it's showing 40 to 50% lower electricity consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. But more crucially is the actual the aspect that these are actually cheaper overall, these systems, and can deliver a lower cost cooling especially to commercial buildings. So the real issue for why they're not coming about isn't so much cost, it's actually just the capacity for cities to be able to visualize and be inspired enough to take forward a district cooling and, attract the private sector through a tendering process that's robust. So all the work that's happened over the last 5 years, what we're doing now is we're in discussions with the National Institute of Urban Affairs to establish a centralized unit linked to NIUA, but also obviously with Ministry of Housing, that will be able to support cities on district cooling through the Smart Cities mission. So it's putting experts on district cooling into the central government. And that's something that we'd really like to do in a multi-partner approach. UNEP, we're trying to get seed funding for that. But also I think there's so many fantastic civil society and private sector that can support that effort as well, as a sort of central approach for building capacity into cities. Another area we're working on, so I mentioned all the different elements of cooling in cities, is we're globally establishing an urban cooling guide for how cities can go about doing sustainable cooling and the role of cities. Everything from nature-based solutions, where we have a working group under WWF, all the way through to district cooling and everything in between. And that will be published in the summer this year. And we're taking that guide and the methodology from it, and we're already starting work in Rajkot in Gujarat to establish what will be the first urban cooling plan for India. And we're trying to raise resources to do that with other cities as well. And one other element I wanted to mention is the role of the state government as well. And so today, UNEP has announced an MOU signed with Bihar on their state action plan for climate change, and helping them to go forward to be a low carbon society and the plan around that. And I think it'll be really important that we look at what's the role of state governments in cooling under those action plans, because obviously so many of the urban planning norms, etc., and the electricity regulations, etc., a lot of that sits with state governments. So I think we're looking forward to using Bihar as a test case of how to link that, low carbon ambition and planning with cool planning as well. I was also asked to talk about mobilizing financial resources to overcome the initial price bump, and it's true. So something like district cooling, at first it will seem, it's an expensive technology. It's mostly used in the West and in high-income countries. But what we're seeing actually is that real estate developers, 10% of their costs might actually, or 5 to 10% of their costs might be for cooling equipment. So a servitization model like district cooling takes that upfront cost away from them. So and puts it onto a private sector that's willing to invest. So it's not actually a problem of the actual capex. There's a lot of willing capital to invest in district cooling. The problem is the financial resources for cities to do the early assessments of district cooling. And so we're looking at, as part of that central expertise in NIUA, to see how we can build it up so that there's also a grant program attached for cities to issue DPRs on district cooling, and possibly even a loan program. So that's an area we're also looking for partners to work with us on, and with NIUA. And I think there's several options for overcoming that initial price bump away from district cooling. We're looking at models whereby municipal financing in one cooling sector could actually reap returns and allow them to intervene on less commercially minded options like tree planting, etc., that do deliver a cooling effect. And finally, we're working with EESL and others to sort of build up a district cooling investment program, and we're also supporting EESL on their super efficient AC program as well. And finally, I wanted, as Satish mentioned, the UNEP hosts the Secretariat of the Cool Coalition, And several members here are already members of that. So Mahindra, TERI, AEEE. And really the goal of that is to increase international collaboration on this, on cooling generally. And so the Urban Cooling Guide I mentioned is being led by the Cool Coalition, and the India Cooling Action Plan and the methodology that's being used in other countries of that is also being supported by that coalition. And so while I think it's great to hear about the India level synergies between the partners, I'd also encourage partners to join that international coalition, because we really want to use that to share experience from India globally. A lot of the issues that you're facing are being faced by many other countries in the region. So, for example, we're supporting Cambodia and Indonesia on cooling action plans based on the India model. So I think there's a huge opportunity to share knowledge through that platform. And I'll stop there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hickman. So our last but not the least, rather the lady of the panel, Ms. Janhavi Parab. She's a sustainability expert with Mahindra Life Spaces. Now, we have been given some little bit of extra time by the organizers. So, Ms. Parab, you can take 5 to 6 minutes, and I hope you'll talk something about the CSR role in implementation of ICAP. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, TERI team, for organizing an industry dialogue on sustainable urban cooling solutions, and thank you for inviting me over here. I was really thrilled and excited to hear the work which is happening under Sheetal initiative, and all I have to say is I could think of as an architect. So by profession, I'm an architect, and I work for the real estate arm of Mahindra Group. And as an architect, one of the greatest architect, Zara Hadid, she's not with us anymore, but she said once about space. And she said that I don't think that architecture is only about shelter. It's about simple enclosure. Which should excite you, which should calm you, which should make you think. And that brings us to space. And it's very important in today's topic, sustainable urban cooling that we have. The minute we talk about to make our key stakeholder, which is our customer, to make them calm, and as an occupier, all you can think about is cooling. Right, and therefore space becomes very important element as an architect and also as a real estate representative to talk about the entire cooling system. And I would just go back, and what I could think about is the way the Sheetal as an acronym was designed. I could think of space as an acronym, and what things mind after hearing all my co-speakers. Space, if you talk about S, stands for stakeholders, because it needs implementation. So whatever you are designing, whatever you are planning, it needs execution. So S, I could thought of stands for stakeholders. P for planning, because it needs a lot of planning. And I think I will echo most of the speakers, me being the last one, but yes, that becomes very important. A stands for adaptive design, and a lot of my co-speakers talked about adaptive designs, technologies, innovation, which is happening in the market, which is I would say the way trends are seen in the market. And C stands for climate change, and C stands for cooling. It's very important, and both of them goes hand in hand. And the last one, which is not the least, is E, which stands for energy. So for me, as a representative of real estate and as an architect, space becomes a holistic kind of a term or terminology for me to kind of deliver the product in a more sustainable fashion. And of course, since we are talking about sustainable urban cooling, the foundation of this is climate responsive designs, and most of the people have talked about and expressed their feelings about climate responsive designs, and that happens to be a good blend of active and passive, right? And therefore, when as architects or as master planners, when we are developing, whether they are cities, infrastructure, or buildings, climate responsive designs is key, and they are designed to combat to climate change. While most of us know that, the fact is that 2/3 of the footprint is yet to be built. Now imagine the kind of responsibility that gets added to each one of us to build a footprint which is more responsible towards nature, which is more responsible towards sustainable housing. And with that thought, in fact, I have something to share. Is we were thinking about why can't we have our own R&D facility, and my earlier co-speaker talked about the investment in the research and development. So when we were talking about an initiative in-house, and it was all about driving us to energy efficiency, we being in real estate, we understand that construction sector almost contributes to 30% of energy consumption, and of course therefore emissions. But having said that, how do we look at solutions? And therefore all we could think is, can we have something which is a center for sustainable habitat? And when we were thinking about designing the entire center of excellence for sustainable habitat, we could think of TERI. We reached out to them, and we have built something called as Mahindra TERI Center of Excellence for Sustainable Habitat, which talks about and tries to work on sustainable, innovative, scalable technologies and building materials which are eco-friendly, which are kind of innovative. At the same time, it will enable the entire real estate sector, manufacturers, developers, architects, to build a sustainable ecosystem in India. And I'm not able to control myself, but talk about the kind of the way we have curated the entire initiative. We have looked at 4 important elements, which are, of course, which will contribute to the entire sustainable housing, which talks about the entire materials database. Often we have seen that we don't get easy access to material properties, and of course understand its impact on a larger scale when it gets executed into a building. The other element which talks about visual comfort. The third one is thermal comfort. So here we are actually talking about how do we bring materials together, how do we test that and create sustainable building envelopes in order to reduce the cooling demand. So I think these are some of the interesting, curation of within the Center of Excellence, which we are currently working on. Quickly, last 2 points which I would drive.
No time. Miss Parab, there is no time.
Sure. So just last few minutes, I would talk about.
There is no time, madam.
Okay, all right. So I think with that, I would just request everybody to kind of visit the website, Mahindra TERI Center of Excellence, look at the work which we are doing, look at the tools that we are building and developing to assess the daylight, thermal comfort, and of course, look at the RETV analysis for building materials. Please do have a look and please share your feedback. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Panelists, I must apologize on my own behalf and on behalf of the organizers that we had to really rush you in making your presentation. I'm sure you had very many valuable points to tell us. And that brings to my closing remarks. My first remark is the TERI, I think you should find a method of getting the presentation of all the panelists on board, collate it somewhere, and put it on the website or some public medium so that we don't lose their thoughts. I mean, because of time constraint, I had to cut them short. But if their thoughts are available and you can put them in public domain, that will mean that people can have a look at and see what they have to say. My second point is that the organizers must knit together what was said during the inauguration session, which took quite some time, and what the panelists said and what they wanted to present, and knit it as a whole, as a documentation or whatever way you want to do it, and make it part of the record so that these constraints of time don't overshadow the record which is maintained of today's deliberation. My third point is that implementation of nationally determined contributions under the Paris Accord has started from 1st January 1921. On the other hand, the Kigali Amendment implementation also did start from 2018, and 2028 is the time when we are going to peak our emissions or production of hydrofluorocarbons. Now, implications of these two have a direct bearing on the national Indian Cooling Action Plan, and during the next 12 months, I think TERI should keep this, take this on board. That how does ICAP get impacted by the imperatives of the NDC and by the imperatives of the Kigali Amendment? My last suggestion is that before we come upon WSDS 2022, and surely there will be an event on cooling, sustainable cooling, you can have 3 or 4 kind of deliberations involving various stakeholders at various levels, the city, the state, the center, the global. And one stakeholder I didn't find today, and that is REGMA. These are the manufacturers of the refrigerated gas, which in fact have to implement the major part of the Kigali Amendment. So the Cooling Coalition or Sheetal can have 3 or 4 sittings with number of stakeholders so that the next webinar in WSDS 2022 can be far more meaningful than it was possible today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, Mr. Moshkar, for chairing this intriguing discussion and conducting it so well despite the shortage of time. I would like to request if we have time and if you could take any questions.
Madhur, I think we had few questions, but let us, because since the plenary session has started, we can conclude this.
Okay. So, Manjeet, I would request you to please give the concluding remarks and extend the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhur. Let me thank all our speakers and panelists for joining us today. We apologize for this time constraint and this last minute glitches in these online events. I would like to thank Ms. Menon for joining us today and very elaborative keynote address. And I think several points she has mentioned where which gives us, I think, full next many years to have our plate full in terms of our activities as a think tank. I would also like to thank Mr. Thiagarajan sir. He has thank you, sir, for joining us today from your busy schedule, and your thoughts were very insightful on the technology development and the monitoring and measurement of the technologies to improve the energy efficiency with the existing technologies, existing equipments. Sir, Dr. Shiris Sinha, thank you so much for joining us today. And your thoughts on SIF's commitment to work towards sustainable cooling. and also highlighting few of the key achievements in year 1 of the Sheetal initiative. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to thank Moshkar sir for chairing this session, and I would have to acknowledge here and mention here that it was quite a last minute request we had made to Moshkar sir, and he's sir, so kind of you that you have accepted our request and joined us to chair this session. And I would like to thank all our panelists, Dr. Dinesh Kumar, Dr. Satish, Bambure sir, Benjamin Hickman from UN Environment Program, and Ms. Janvi Parak for joining us in this event. Last but not the least, I would like to also thank our technical support, IT support team, Keystone team, and our TERI colleagues, Madhur, Shan, Ashish, Shivam, and Gaurav for organizing this event. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madhur.
So with this, we have concluded our session. Thank you so much for joining.